Today we're going to go over skeletal system, bone and bone tissues. Skeletal system forms a framework of the human body, it consists of bone, cartilage, ligaments. So we're going to see what are the functions and cells, different things we studying in this class. So the function wise is provide that structural support, protect vital organs, enable movements, stores essential minerals such as calcium, phosphorus. Also, it is a house for the bone marrow, which is responsible for producing blood cells. So you can see all these functions I mentioned here. Make sure you look at that support. So framework of the body. Think about if you didn't have a bone, what happened? You know how you go? Can you sit? Can you walk? Can you bike ride something? These things won't happen. So the protection is another thing. So mainly they're protecting the vital organs. For example, brain, which is an organ protected by skull. Then another example is ribs. They protecting heart and that lungs. Then spinal cord is protected by vertebra. Another function, movement. So the bone is attached to the muscles by tendons. So when muscle contracts, bone start moving. Bone cannot move without muscles. The mineral storage is another function. The minerals like calcium and phosphorus stored inside that bone marrow. Then blood production, cell production. For example, RBC, WBC, white blood cells, red blood cells. Those are the blood cells which is produced inside the bone. The process we called hematopoiesis, which is happening in bone marrow. Energy storage. Example, in yellow bone marrow, when you become adult, is more yellow bone marrow you would see. So it's a lot of fat storage inside the bone. So types of cartilage. There are different types of cartilage. Which one is a hyaline cartilage, elastic, and fibrocartilage. So hyaline cartilage, which you see that end of the long bones, femur, humerus, phalanges, and the tip of that one you see that articular cartilage, which is made with hyaline cartilage. The nose, tip of the nose, ribs, these are areas you see that hyaline cartilage, which is that mainly they reduce the friction. Think about long bone that meeting with another bone, especially phalanges. You see that phalanges, you see 3 long bones in that each finger. So each one can be that friction is a way when friction work can be damage that bones. So reduce that friction by what? Putting that cartilage in between. Then elastic, just like the name, they have that elastic in nature, which is a flexible. Ear, think about your ear. Ear is what? More low, flexible. External ear we talking about, which is a pinna. Another one is epiglottis, which is when we going to go over this one, respiratory system, digestive system, when we study, which prevent that choking. Then another one is fibrocartilage. You see that intervertebral disc. Intervertebral disc is the in between the vertebra. Think about this one vertebra, this another. In between the vertebra you see that intervertebral disc, which is a cartilage. Then pubic symphysis. They think about this is a pelvic cradle, pelvic region. This is a vertebra here. Vertebra is going up and up. So this is a pelvic cavity where that most of the respiratory and urinary system or organs related to that stays in that pelvic region. So in the anterior portion you see that pubic symphysis, which is a cartilage, is very strong support for that. For example, intervertebral disc, that is vertebra is holding a lot of weight from the person. So this will support that body weight and body weight. That's a very strong support. So one other thing about the cartilage is not like a bone. They give you the support, but they are avascular. The prefix A means what? Lacking. Lacking what? That vessel, vascular means vessels. They lacking blood vessels. If you don't have blood vessels in that ear or tip of the nose, ribs, what happens? Damage happened. Is repairing is not happening, or slowly it will happen. So that means if it doesn't have blood vessels going to the region, it doesn't get nutrients and signals for that healing purpose. Then cells of that blood cells, no, blood cells, bones. So I'm going to erase some of the stuff. So the cells they are different types of bone cells. The tissue is osteos. Then when you hear that osteo, that means related to bone. You see that prefix is osteo, that means bone. Then another thing, example here, that chondro. Chondro is osteo means bone, chondro is cartilage. Chondrocytes, which is cartilage cells. Then here we see osteogenic cells. Genic means what? Forming, new formation, genic. So this osteogenic cells, which is stem cells, that can be differentiated into osteoblast. Osteoblast is another type of bone cells. Main function of that osteoblast, which is a bone forming cells. Those are the one making the bones. So for example, this is a cell, think about it. It's making that bone around it. Then osteocytes. When you hear about cytes, means what? Cells. Bone cells, that's a mature bone cells. The main function is maintaining matrix. Once the osteoblast is forming the bone, you need to what? Maintaining. So calcium, it does have all the nutrients, how the communication goes. So the extracellular matrix is maintained by that osteocytes. Osteoclast, this is a bone resorbing cells. They breaking down bones. Mainly they breaking down the bones when that we don't have enough calcium, lacking the calcium from the diet, bone is going to break it down, so the calcium can release into that blood vessels. They will go through the blood vessels, then it will calcium go into that mainly functions. Calcium is very important for our system. For example, that muscle contraction, skeletal muscle contraction, cardiac muscle contraction. Think about cardiac muscle doesn't contract. What happened? It doesn't go. It's not going to pump the blood. If it doesn't pump the blood, that's it. That's it. So this one is very important. So if you don't have enough calcium in the blood, your system will tell that osteoclast breaking down the bone so it can release calcium into that blood vessels. That's why we have to have a diet with that diet has to holding calcium. Then next one is osteochondral progenitor cells. Progenitor, when you hear that is some stem cells, they can be differentiated into certain cells. Can become that osteoblast or chondroblast. As they can differentiate it into bone cells and cartilage cells. So these are the different types of bone cells. Each one has a different function. Make sure you write it down and study. Then gross anatomy of bone. So the bone can be different types. They can be long bone, short bone, irregular, and flat bones. So we're going to see long bones are example of that humerus, femur, phalanges, etc. The short bones are the carpals and tarsals, which is in the ankles and wrist area. They are small bones. Flat bones, you see on the skull is going to be flat. Compact bone, you see that both sides, spongy bones in that middle. Irregular bones, example is vertebra. When you look at that vertebral bone, is going to be, it's not having this particular shape. So it's like irregular shape. And also pelvic bones. So I'm going to explain few things over here. It's a long bone, example of the long bone. So the long bone has a spongy bone and a compact bone. Compact bone is very it's going to be see outside, very dense. Spongy bones, a lot of pores. Trabeculae is going to see over here. This is a place where that bone marrow, it can be yellow bone marrow, red bone marrow. So the blood vessels, either blood cells formation happening if it's a red bone marrow. Yellow bone marrow has a flat storage, fat storage. So that is a spongy bone. So that compact bone, if you look at that, it's very dense. They are made with osteons. So osteons are that ring-shaped structure. Is look like a onion ring. So layers. The layers we call the lamella. See here lamella. So there are cells inside here, this cells which is called osteocytes. They maintaining that bone matrix. There are a lot of blood vessels is going. This is a Harvestian canal going longitudinally. Volksman canal is one that like this is going connecting the two Harvestian canals. So the another thing, a lacuna is the one that osteocytes is a mature cells maintaining that bone matrix, which stays inside a space. The space we called lacuna. So also you can see that blue structure both sides of that long bone, which is a cartilage. This is portion called epiphysis. It can be proximal, which is closer to that origin or that structure attached to. This is a femur. So this femur is going to be what? Attached to that pelvic girdle. So here this is a distal away from that one, distal part of the epiphysis. This portion we called the diaphysis, middle portion. So center, the canal is going through this one. Is a lot of blood vessels in the medullary cavity of that long bone. Blood vessels you see. So this one histology. We're talking about the histology. Histology is what? Study of tissues. Study of tissues. There are two different types of bones, compact bone and spongy bone. Compact bone, I said dense. They are organized as osteons. Osteons are basic structural unit or functional unit of that compact bone. They look like onion rings I mentioned that. Then spongy bone, other name called trabecular. Another names are there. They are porous, lot of holes, then filled with bone marrow. It can be that fat or accumulate fat or red blood cells. Trabecular structure. That's a histology wise. Then they are function wise, they are resistant. They are resist bending. Some of the compact bone is very strong. The spongy bone otherwise they are lighter. They found in that epiphysis region. Like I mentioned, the long bone has epiphysis region and diaphysis. Epiphysis region is the spongy bone. Then bone development and osteogenesis. First one, we're going to go over that intramembranous ossification. There are two different ways the bones can develop. The name we called osteogenesis. Like genesis means what? Formation. Osteo means bone. Bone formation, bone development, we called osteogenesis. There are two different ways this bone can form: intramembranous or endochondral ossification. So we're going to see that first one, intramembranous ossification. The flat bone formation, flat bone formation, which is a cranium. Cranium is the example of flat bone or clavicle. So how this form by that from that membrane. Membrane is converted into bone. So that so you can see that here. So osteoblast, you remember osteoblast cells, they what? They're making that bone. So osteo, then they round that some membrane structure. This is a membrane structure, mesenchymal cells and stuff. They osteoblast around it. Then they become that, they forming that bone matrix. So some of the cells stuck inside that lacuna. This is called osteocytes. They are mature cells. Their function is only what? Maintaining that matrix. These are the one forming that matrix. This is maintaining the matrix. Then they forming that trabeculae. So you can see histology that structure. Then you can see over here that they're forming that osteoblast. Some of the, you can see most of those osteoclast, the matrix, you can see that around. So the bones start, spongy bones start forming in the beginning. So a lot of trabeculae is forming. Then this one, this membrane structure in the both sides already forming. This is a formation of flat bone. So the both sides going to be compact, middle going to be spongy. So outer layer is called periosteum. Periosteum is a membrane covering of the long bone. If you have a long bone, if you maybe eating Kentucky Fried Chicken, Papa's Chicken, you long bones, you ever see, notice after muscle, if you eat all the muscle, see, you can see that small membrane layer is coming out from that bone. So that is called periosteum. Peri means what? Around. Periosteum, around that bone structure, covering membrane is covering called periosteum. Then around that there are cells are there, osteoblasts are there, then osteocytes. They forming that, developing the bone, calcifying that cartilage, become that become that bony part. Then this is what? This is calcify and forming that bone. This is a lot of trabeculae, you can see porous and stuff. That is a formation of that intramembranous ossification. This one is This is actually example endochondral ossification. Endochondral ossification is formed the long bones like a femur, humerus, and etc. So this long bone is forming by that cartilage. Cartilage become that bony structure. So this cartilage, this is the perichondrium is there. Perichondrium is around that cartilage because it's a cartilage, it's not a bone right now. The beginning they forming that primary center of that ossification. Primary ossification center is forming. So once this primary ossification in that diaphysis, this middle region is starting. So then blood vessels are start coming in, forming. So then this cartilage become calcified. So only thing about long bones, they are both sides are what? Compact bone, middle is a spongy bone. The both sides of that long bone epiphysis, a lot of spongy bones are there. Then vascularization happen. Vascularization means blood vessels coming in. Periosteum is forming. Then next thing is the secondary center of ossification is forming in that both sides. So primary is started, then second one, secondary ossification center is forming. So both sides epiphyseal cartilage are there. That's articular cartilage. This is epiphysis, diaphysis. This is a epiphyseal plate is here. Where that later the bone that going to be long wise is going to growth is happening in this region. So the bone formation end till that male around 21, female around 18. So that period of time you have enough calcium nutrients. These long bones can be made lengthened, and you get to height and things determined by that one. Nutrients, it's very important. Main thing is genetics. Your parents are their height is determine your height. But if you lacking nutrients, so the teenage years, you won't grow. You can stunt your growth. Make sure you eat that nutrient rich food to maintaining that bone formation, maintaining that dense and healthy bone. So bone growth can be bone growth long wise longitudinal growth can be stopped by that certain age, but remodeling happening throughout your lifetime. There's a longitudinal growth happening in that epiphyseal plate where the cartilage I will show you later. A positional growth width-wise, the remodeling is happening throughout. So epiphyseal plate zone. There are 5 zones: resting, proliferation, hypertrophic, calcification, ossification. So this is a zone of resting, which is this area. A lot of cartilages are there. There are cartilage. You don't see any bony structure. This cartilage become bone. That is one of the thing about that endochondral ossification in the long bones. The cartilage become bone. So this area is cartilage. Then it's become coming this way. It's become more bony structure. So it's exactly like this. It's a cartilage portion. This is a portion is going to be making bones. This area. Okay, away from the cartilage. So it's growing like this. So second is a proliferation. Only thing over here is just dividing. Slowly that chondrocytes cartilage cells start dividing. Then here proliferation phase. Proliferation is making more cells. Production of that epiphyseal slide of the plate as the chondrocyte divide form stack of cells. You can see that stack of cells over here, bunch of them. Then next one, hypertrophic. Hyper means what? Enlarging. These cells, most of them forming here, then is become enlarged and mature cells do their functions in that hypertrophic region. Here you can see it's not big. You can see bigger cells over here. Then fourth, they become calcified, become matrix is calcified, then chondrocytes sites start die. So chondrocytes are what? Cartilage cells, they start dying. Then the fifth stage zone is the bone is that ossified, that the portion is going to be shown is ossified. The cartilage on the diaphyseal side of that plate is replaced by bony structure. You see that here you see that lot of calcium, that bone formation this way is happening. Then epiphyseal plate become remnant is just a line over there. When you look at the adult bone, you don't see any epiphyseal plate is the one cartilage where the growth is happening. Then when certain age you get there 21 or 18, this plate become just a remnant, is become epiphyseal line. That's why you can determine if you see long bone is adult or young, you can determine that age or the certain time period of their life. So the factors affecting the bone growth, which is nutrition, hormones, and physical activity. Nutrition like calcium is very important, vitamin D, C, these are very important for that bone growth. If you don't have lacking those things, so make sure your diet included these nutrients. Hormones like growth hormone, thyroid, sex hormones, they are very important for the bone growth. Physical activity, which will stimulate the bone density throughout your life. Never stop. Do the physical activity so that you're going to build a better bone. Then next one, we're going to go over that calcium homeostasis. Calcium is very important for that bone formation, remodeling, and maintaining their functions. You heard that before. How this calcium is very important, that's we're going to study right now. So this calcium level has to maintain in that blood, which is that there is a standard for that. It has to maintain that, maintaining that in the normal way, which is called homeostasis. This is a calcium homeostasis. This is a definition we study in that first chapter. Homeostasis is the one that maintaining everything in that stable condition. So calcium, which is mainly, you see, if you have too much calcium in the diet, it can store in the bone. Also, the calcium can be absorbed through intestine, small intestine. Then if you have too much, then you're eating diet with a lot of calcium, it can excrete through that kidneys. Calcium is through that blood vessels. Calcium is too much, is going to be what? Stored in the bone. We have a low calcium in the blood vessels, start absorbing from that small intestine. So there are few hormones regulate that maintaining that homeostasis, calcium homeostasis. Those hormones are calcitriol, calcitonin, parathyroid hormone, growth hormone, sex hormone, thyroid hormone. These are the hormones regulating that calcium level. So the calcitriol, what they do, where that forming? The kidneys are the one forming that, making that calcitriol. Now increase the calcium, which will increase the calcium absorption increase blood calcium by stimulating intestinal absorption of calcium. So if you don't have enough calcium, your diet doesn't have enough calcium, you don't, your blood cells, your blood vessels doesn't have enough calcium, this calcitriol produced by that release from the kidney, they what? They start reabsorbing calcium from that digestive system, everything. Don't let that go. Just take everything. And also, so increase that calcium into that blood vessels. Then also calcitonin, this is produced from thyroid gland, which inhibit the osteoclasts. It's like opposite to each other. So if you have too much calcium, calcitonin is produced by thyroid, which will stop. Inhibits means prevent osteoclast. So what happened? They lower the blood calcium. So osteoclast, what they do? They breaking down the bone, they release the calcium into that blood vessels. If you have too much already, you don't need to do that. So you need, somebody has to what? Prevent osteoclast to come and do their jobs. Then parathyroid hormone, which is produced from that parathyroid gland. Parathyroid gland is the posteriorly that thyroid gland. The thyroid gland is the posterior. You see that four of them. Thing. So those are the things in that posterior view. You see that parathyroid glands. They actually stimulate the osteoclast. When they somebody stimulate means what? Stimulate, they activate the osteoclast. They are go and breaking down that bones and release the calcium into that blood. That will happen when that blood calcium level is low. That means if your diet doesn't have calcium, your blood vessels doesn't have calcium, some reason, maybe your digestive system cannot absorb calcium, some reason, you have maybe some infection in that small intestine. So different reason. So it can be what? Parathyroid can be stimulate the osteoclast to break it down the bones and release the calcium into that blood vessels. Then growth hormone, sex hormone, thyroid hormone, which will promote the growth and maintenance. So this is how that regulation of that blood calcium level. We're going to show that. If your blood calcium level is, this is a graph, this is a y-axis showing the blood volume. In the normal case, that should be maintained like this one, standard. If it's going up and down, that means what? Dysregulation. In this case, it's going up, that means calcium level is high. Your diet has a lot of calcium, or your maybe some other some kind of disorganized stuff going on in your system. So calcium level is high. So what happens? Stimulate the thyroid gland. If it's too much calcium, the calcium stimulate the thyroid gland, especially thyroid gland C cells in the thyroid gland. C cells. The C cells detect that high calcium level, that will secrete that calcitonin. You remember we talk about calcitonin? The calcitonin, what they do? They inhibit that osteoclast, the slowing bone resorption. So then they inhibit the osteoclast, then breaking down that bone is going to be stopped, that less calcium release into that blood. So what happened? That restore the homeostasis by what? Lowering the calcium level in that blood vessels. For other thing around, if your calcium level is low, somehow you're not getting enough calcium in the blood, so it will stimulate the parathyroid gland. Then parathyroid hormones, which activates that calcitriol, which is in the kidneys we study. which stimulate that osteoclast. Osteoclast, they breaking down the bone, release the calcium into the blood. Then calcium reabsorption by kidneys. If you have a kidney is if you have too much calcium, you can release through that urine, that kidney tubule that release the calcium into that waste, but they reabsorb those things. It's not releasing a lot of calcium by calcium through excretion, also absorb calcium in that small intestine. This way they maintain, bringing back that calcium level up, and that maintaining that calcium level, that restore that homeostasis. So bone repair is bone can repair, not like a cartilage. They are vascular. When you see bone structure, you see a lot of blood vessels going. Vascular means they bringing the nutrients and things into the bone. So that's very important. So here that humerus, the bone is broken. So what happened in the first? If you see one bone is broken, there are a lot of blood vessels is damaged. So that blood is actually accumulate in that region, blood vessel. They're forming hematoma. That's the first one. The second one, internal callus form wherever the broken edge, wherever the between the broken edge. So also callus is formed that collar region around the break. So blood vessels is penetrate through that. So woven bone is start forming. So it's a cartilage, because the long bones are formed from cartilage. So cartilage is over here forming that. So blood vessels are going into that region. The callus ossification, the woven or spongy bone. This is a spongy bone, trabeculae bone replaced by that the callus, calcifying this. Then later that remodeling, the taking out all unwanted stuff, debris and stuff. So then compact bone is forming in the both sides. So then also the woven or spongy bone in the middle, lot of blood vessels restored. The callus is removed. So medullary cavity is formed. So this one is showing callus around the broken humerus. You can see that. So this is steps of bone repair. So it is because avascular. So if it's a cartilage, it's a avascular. So its repair is not easy or not happening at all. This one we're going to talk about the different types of fractures, bone fractures. It's easy, can get fracture, especially if you have osteoporosis and symptoms like that. Uh, so it's the different types. So one thing is a simple. Simple is actually closed. The bone breaks without piercing the skin, just a closed break. Then compound is an open break. Bone breaks and penetrate the skin. Penetrate that. This one is commuted. The bone is actually shatters into multiple pieces. You can see that. Then green stick, partial break. Is the children, this is mainly seen in the children. So their bone is not rigid or adult, it's a little bit flexible, so it won't partially break sometimes. Then there's a spiral, is caused by twisting force. Twisting, this is the one. Impacted, So one bone fragment is driven into another one. So this is in the pelvic region. This is head of that femur. This is the neck region is actually breaking back. So these are different types of fractures. Just for your information. Then pathologies and disorders. One of the thing you may heard common is osteoporosis. You see that in elderly decrease the bone mass because the calcium is not deposited. The matrix around the bone is not maintained. So that is easy to break. Bones, if you have osteoporosis with elderly that humans. So maintaining this by that calcium, increase the calcium level in the diet, and sometimes calcium pills taken, etc. Go see the doctor is very important for that maintaining that bone density. Osteopenia, this is early bone loss. It is not in that elderly. It can be happen any age group. Rickets is a vitamin D deficiency in children. Scurvy is a vitamin D deficiency. So these are the vitamin C, D, and calcium is very important for that maintaining that skeletal system, that homeostasis, and maintaining that healthy bone. It's not moving. The summary of this one actually that we study, that's the next slide is summary. We study bone structure, how long bones, the compact bone, different bone structure we study, and functions, what are the different cells, what is the disorders, how that homeostasis, maintaining the calcium regulations. We study different things. So go over these things and study. Okay.